All right, ready to dive in. Today we're going deep, really deep, into how research actually leads to innovation.
Yeah, it's not always a straight line, is it?
Definitely not. We're ditching those textbook diagrams and uncovering the real story, those winding paths and unexpected turns of discovery.
It's way more interesting that way.
Oh, absolutely. We got to start with this idea of the linear model of research, basic to applied and bam, innovation. Where did that come from?
It's classic, isn't it? That research pyramid
Yeah.
with pure research at the very top, almost untouchable.
Right. But how did that image become so ingrained? Well, that's where Vannevar Bush comes in, this pivotal figure.
His 1944 report, Science, the Endless Frontier. It's like he wrote the rule book on how we think about research, even today.
And to think he was writing this in the shadow of World War II, right? As the director of the Office of Scientific Research and Development, he saw firsthand how science, radar, penicillin, even the atomic bomb impacted the war.
President Roosevelt actually tasked him with figuring out the role of science in peacetime. What comes next? How do we keep this momentum of discovery going? Science, the endless frontier, was his answer.
Wow, okay, so that's where we get terms like basic and applied research, right?
Bush argued that basic research is performed without thought of practical ends. It's about knowledge for knowledge's sake.
So a physicist unraveling the laws of the universe versus an engineer designing a better solar panel.
Precisely. And he believed to protect basic research, to keep that creativity alive, it had to be separate. He even said applied research invariably drives out pure if the two are mixed.
Interesting, but didn't that create a kind of hierarchy, like pure research was somehow superior?
It did. And while his report was crucial for securing funding for science, that separation unintentionally created this pecking order.
Yeah, like real breakthroughs only come from pure curiosity, which seems a bit simplistic, don't you think?
Totally. It ignores how discoveries actually happen in the real world.
Right. Is it really that one directional? Does research really flow in this neat line?
That's the million-dollar question. And to get to the bottom of it, we have to talk about a scientific giant, Louis Pasteur.
Okay, pasteurization, right. Keeping our milk fresh. But how does that challenge this linear model? Seems pretty practical to me.
And that's what's fascinating about him. He wasn't content with just solving the problem. He had to understand the why, the fundamental science behind it. And it led to these huge breakthroughs.
Okay, so what kind of problems are we talking about?
Picture this. Mid-1800s, the French alcohol industry, they're having some issues.
Issues with alcohol.
Big issues. Fermentation, it's unpredictable, batches are spoiling, no one knows why. So who do they call?
Pasteur, the microbe master. But would he even be considered an applied researcher back then?
It's funny, that term wasn't really used the way it is now. But what he did, that was applied research in action. He goes straight to a beet juice factory, takes samples, back in the lab.
Gets out his microscope, starts hunting down those sugar-loving microbes.
Exactly. Back then, everyone thought fermentation was purely chemical. But Pasteur, he sees these tiny microorganisms, yeasts, thriving without oxygen.
Whoa, anaerobic fermentation.
Yeah.
And all because he was trying to help out a bunch of brewers.
And here's the best part. This wasn't just a lucky break. This discovery, how these microorganisms work, how they use sugar, it was the key to solving their problem. He could control fermentation, prevent spoilage, make it consistent.
So he's saving an industry and pushing the boundaries of biology all at the same time? That's amazing.
And it didn't stop there. Anthrax, rabies, even diseases in silkworms. Pasteur tackled it all, while revolutionizing how we understand germs and disease.
Okay, that is a legacy. But if we're saying this linear model isn't the whole story, where does someone like Pasteur fit in? How do we categorize him?
That's where Donald Stokes comes in and his book Pasteur's Quadrant.
Pasteur's Quadrant. Did he create some kind of a science board game or something?
Not quite. But he did give us a new way to think about research. He said just labeling it basic or applied is too simplistic. Instead, he created this 2x2 matrix, a quadrant.
Okay, so like a graph. What are the axes?
Think of it like this. One axis is quest for fundamental understanding our pure science, like Niels Bohr exploring the quantum world. The other is the consideration of use, more like Edison, tinkering away on a new invention.
Got it. So Bohr on one end, Edison on the other. Where would someone like, say, Marie Curie fall on this quadrant? Driven by understanding radioactivity, but also its applications in medicine.
Curie is a great example of someone who embodies both. Deeply curious, but also aware of the potential to help people. She sits comfortably in that top right quadrant, right alongside Pasteur.
So that's research that's both fundamental and driven by a real-world purpose. Use-inspired basic research. And Pasteur, he's the poster child.
Exactly. It's not about choosing one or the other. It's recognizing that amazing things can happen when curiosity and practicality work together.
Use-inspired basic research. I like it. Okay, any other examples of this? I'm ready for more stories of unexpected discoveries.
Oh, get ready, because we're about to enter the world of chirality, and it all starts with a simple observation.
Okay, chirality. For those of us who haven't cracked open an organic chemistry textbook in a while, what are we talking about here?
Think about your hands.
Okay.
They're mirror images of each other, right?
Yeah,
But you can't perfectly superimpose one on top of the other.
right.
That's chirality. It's this handedness. And molecules can have it too. Seems like a small thing, but it has huge implications, especially for how drugs work.
Right, because even if the chemical formula is the same, those mirror image molecules can act totally differently. Like trying to fit a left shoe on your right foot, not going to happen.
Exactly. And this whole idea came about from this really cool intersection of observation, curiosity, and just solving a problem. It starts with a scientist named Mitscherlich, and he's working with tartaric acid. This acid was known to rotate polarized light, basically change its direction. But here's the thing. He had these two forms of tartaric acid, chemically identical, but
what? What was different?
one rotated light, the other didn't. Mitscherlich, he was stumped. Couldn't figure out why these two seemingly identical substances would behave so differently.
So he's got this scientific mystery on his hands. What happens next? Does Pasteur swoop in?
He was about to enter the scene. Pasteur, he was fascinated by this tartaric acid puzzle. Took those same acids, put them under his microscope, and get this. He saw that the crystals of the acid that didn't rotate light were actually a mixture of two different shapes, mirror images of each other.
No way. He's seeing chirality right there under the microscope. So then what?
He gets to work. Carefully separates those two types of crystals, and what do you know? He found that solutions made from each type of crystal rotated the light in opposite directions. He'd separated the left-handed and right-handed molecules.
That's incredible. Just by looking at the shape of crystals, he unlocks this whole concept in chemistry. And this wasn't some big fancy experiment either, just observation and ingenuity. Speaking of ingenuity, wasn't there an Indian scientist who was really inspired by Pasteur's work?
Absolutely. J.C. Bose, fascinated by this chirality idea, and he wondered if it could go beyond molecules.
Okay, now that is thinking outside the box. But how do you even go about testing something like that?
This is where Bose's ingenuity really shines through. He used something that was just readily available in his lab. Jute fibers. Twisted them up, created both right-handed and left-handed coils, and then when he passed polarized electric waves through these twisted fibers.
Don't tell me. He found that those fibers rotated the polarization, just like the tartaric acid crystals rotated the light.
You got it. What a brilliant way to demonstrate a fundamental concept using really simple materials. It really makes you think about how you don't always need a big fancy lab to make groundbreaking discoveries, do you?
It really shows that science is for everyone, isn't it? You just need that curiosity, that willingness to experiment.
Exactly. And this brings us back to that interconnectedness we keep talking about. Mitscherlich's observation leads to Pasteur's breakthrough, which then inspires J.C. Bose across the globe. This ripple effect, it just keeps going, like with the Haber-Bosch process.
Oh, absolutely. That's how we produce enough fertilizer to feed the planet. It's essential for modern agriculture.
It is, but here's the thing. When they developed it back in the early 20th century, they didn't totally understand how it worked. They knew they needed to combine nitrogen and hydrogen to get ammonia, and they figured out the right conditions, a catalyst, to make it happen. But the exact mechanism, how that catalyst worked, that was a mystery for decades.
Wait, so they created this hugely important process without even fully getting the chemistry. Talk about a leap of faith.
It just goes to show sometimes you have to trust your gut and go for it, even without all the answers. But the story doesn't end there. Decades later, a scientist named Gerhard Ertl used all these new techniques to actually figure out the detailed mechanism of the Haber-Bosch process. He showed step by step how that iron catalyst interacted with the molecules.
It's like they had the tool that was already changing the world, and then bam, Ertl comes along with the fundamental research to explain it. What a perfect example of basic and applied research working together.
Right. It shows how these discoveries don't always happen in a straight line. Sometimes it's the applications that come first that drive the quest for deeper understanding.
And then sometimes it's the tools we build for one problem that unlock a whole other field, like
Right.
Norman Sutin and his work on electron transfer reactions.
Ah, Sutin. He knew how important a good tool was. He was trying to study these super fast reactions, electron transfers between molecules. We're talking milliseconds, even faster.
Trying to study something that fast? That's like trying to time a hummingbird flapping its wings.
It was a huge challenge. So what does he do? He invents a device called the stop flow apparatus. It can mix reactants super quickly and then let him monitor the reactions over these incredibly short timescales. Totally changed the game.
Wow.
Yeah.
A high-speed camera for molecules. What a visual.
Right. And it wasn't just for him either. The data he got using this new device, it became super important for other scientists like Rudolf Marcus, who ended up winning a Nobel Prize for his work on electron transfer.
Talk about a ripple effect. Sutin builds this tool, makes groundbreaking measurements, and then those measurements become the foundation for a whole new theory.
And that's what's so amazing about research. It's not always about chasing the big discoveries, the Nobel Prizes. It's about following your curiosity, building those tools, and adding to this huge web of knowledge. You just never know what little observation or question could be the start of something incredible. Yeah.
So true. Well, that was an incredible deep dive into the world of research and discovery. It's amazing to see how these breakthroughs don't always follow a straight line, and how sometimes the most practical problems can lead to the most profound insights.
Absolutely. It really is a testament to the power of human curiosity and our drive to understand the world around us. And who knows what mysteries are still out there just waiting for us to uncover them.
Exactly. So keep those questions coming and never stop exploring. Until next time, keep those minds curious.